Welcome to the John Harrison Podcast. Statistics show us that about 70% of people are disengaged in the workplace. Obviously, that affects bottom lines of companies, individual, their own engagement at work, but also affects families and communities. We don't want to just be frustrated about things that are going on in the workplace or the world. We want to do something about it. So we're going to talk about this while others aren't, and we hope you will join us on this journey.
Welcome back to the John Harrison Podcast. This is Madeline, and today we have the whole team here. I've got Melissa and Jason and John. So today we're going to be talking about earning your leader's trust, and I'm just going to shoot it straight to John.
So in our longer sessions, we talk about 9 expectations, of course, for employees and leaders, one of which is making sound decisions, which applies to everybody. Now, that doesn't mean always making perfect decisions, but if you are a person that makes sound decisions, ultimately that inspires confidence in your boss and you. So I've figured out over my years that most employees want to make more money and probably be left alone. Usually they like both of those, like leave me alone and pay me more. Well, just joking about that, the only way you generally will have an opportunity to make more money is if people have confidence in you. And as far as being left alone, same thing. If you want to be generally have your boss be hands-off, there has to be a trust factor there. So in terms of inspiring confidence, it's not just with your boss, but do your peers trust you to get things done and do what you say you're going to do? And if you are a supervisor, do your direct reports feel the same way? So it's really, there's several factors that we get into more depth in this in our sessions, but 2 things really come to mind that we want to talk about in this podcast. One is integrity, because when that is damaged, it really does damage confidence in yourself from other people. And then anticipating your leader's questions. So let me just kick off integrity, and I'll let the team jump in here. But if we're honest, all of us have violated integrity at some point in our lives to some extent. I mean, even when we were kids, telling what we used to call a white lie, or we've done something, we've probably all broke the traffic speed limits at times, or things like that. So I think it's rare to have anybody say, nope, I've never, ever violated integrity. There's obviously different degrees of that. But I think the point is it can show up in so many ways. Some people might instantly think of illegal activities with companies. It could be, just in how people conduct themselves during the day at work, things like that. So that word integrity, kind of like the word respect, means different things to different people. But the people that I had the most confidence in my time at Caterpillar, people in my family, whoever it is, friends or people that they are living by a code of integrity. Doesn't mean they're perfect, but you're not questioning kind of everything they're saying or doing, or do they have an ulterior motive, whatever. So Jason, from your side, now Jason, as you've been in the financial world in both nonprofits, for-profits, that's one that people might think of instantly as, well, that can show up in the numbers, so to speak. But examples of where you may have seen something like that, or why that can become a stumbling block to confidence.
Well, for instance, if let's just say you have something planned, a conference or something like that, and you have a budget for it, right? So let's say you have a certain number for the conference, and then let's just say you didn't have the conference. And then maybe one of the employees or maybe the boss says, hey, why don't we use that money over here for this other thing, whether it be to buy a new vehicle or this or that, it could be anything for the company.
And that's a case where that's not illegal.
Right, exactly.
You're not going to go to jail for something like that.
Right. So it's not always illegal, but that's not what that money was earmarked for, and for instance, I know we've had a board of directors in the past, at some different companies, and they are the ones that set these things. So we don't want to misuse their trust in us, or be misguided in that and say, oh, yeah, well, we did this. You know what I'm saying?
We're doing this instead, yes.
Yes, we're doing this instead. So anyway, so just because it's not illegal doesn't mean it's right necessarily.
Can I play devil's advocate with you for just a second? So I feel like in that example that you gave, right, that's not to say that funds can't be shifted around in an organization for something that makes sense for the business, right? Whether it is process improvements or, general maintenance needs,
yes,
or maybe another department really does need another vehicle, and we can shift those funds for something that makes sense for the business. But I kind of feel like, depending on whatever, the scenario really entails, that, if you're wanting to use those funds for something that just benefits a certain group,
Yes.
for something that doesn't, quote unquote, benefit the business, that's where it can become questionable.
Right. And if I don't go get approval for it, right? And so, because I don't have the ultimate say, mostly as an accountant or a finance person, I don't have, but if I as an accountant go, oh yeah, let's just go ahead and move these funds over, and I don't have any approval from the bosses or the boss's bosses, then that's where it can definitely get a little shady almost. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and I think the way I used to think about this, and we talk about this even in our firm, is if it was exposed. If this decision was left on the copy machine, so to speak, which used to happen at CAT, by the way, and there'd be things left on the copy machine, and somebody, hey, did you see this? And I always felt like, no, everything we do, we could talk about it publicly in our company because we could defend it. Now, I remember a time Caterpillar was in a difficult season economically, and the corporate cafeteria in our headquarters was being redone at the same time. And of course, you can imagine people are like, "Oh, sure, we can't, I can't get a new, computer mouse, but they're got a beautiful new cafeteria in the headquarters building." And I think, I remember our CEO explaining that in some meeting and saying, "We had this scheduled 18 months ago, and the contractor was available at this time." I mean, people didn't love it, but he didn't like hide it or gloss over it. He just went, no, this is why we're doing this right now. I know that. And I think that's the kind of thing too. Whatever decision you're making as an employee, could you, if it was made public, so to speak, can you defend it? Even if it may have not been the exact correct thing to do at the time, there was a reasonable approach as to why you gone about that.
Yeah, we use the word defend a lot, but I really think it's more just explaining it, being transparent about it and why we're doing what we're doing when we're doing it.
And I like that you said that because they still might not be happy about it, but at least you could explain it and quote unquote defend it. So I like that.
And I think for an employee, if let's say you get 30 minutes for lunch and you were going to go run an errand at lunch, well, you might tell your boss ahead of time, hey, I'm going to run an errand. My plan is to be back at 30 minutes, but that way, if something goes wrong, if the boss says, well, I really can't have you gone for more than 30 minutes today because of X, you're just getting it on the table, and not if it looks sneaky in any ways.
Right.
Not that you're purposely trying to be sneaky, but if you get back at 40 minutes and you come in a different door so your boss doesn't see you, and all of those kinds of things start to make people wonder a little bit.
Yes, yeah, I've seen that happen before.
Yeah, what you're saying, John, actually, I'm going to admit something here. So it's an intervention, right? So it reminded me of a time. So I used to work at a dress store. It was my first job ever. I can't remember. I was over 16 because I was driving, and they would send me to the seamstress down the road. And so I would load up all the dresses and drive down there and drop them off. And I would take the long way back to work and sometimes stop through a drive-through to get food. But I'm on the clock. So I knew that I'm lingering trying to get back to work. And of course, now I don't know anyone. I don't know if I ever apologized or how that situation went, but I just remember I would do that sometimes and feel slightly guilty, that kind of twinge of okay, I'm going over, my time. I should be back.
Yeah, and I appreciate the
the honesty,
the honesty and the guilt admission.
Guilt.
But I think we all have, and people would call this thing different depending on where they are in their lives. Mm-hmm. You might call it, your conscience, or there's other terms in faith-based community. But I think we all know down deep, and this is, again, a silly story, but when my oldest daughter was about 4, probably, we were at a furniture store, and they had a potted plant with all this different colored stones in the plant itself. They were almost like marble looking things. And Lindsay was really an easy child overall. So we got in the car, and I see Lindsay holding one of these little stones. Mm-hmm. And I go, hey babe, where'd you get that stone? Because I thought, maybe the lady gave it to her or something. And as soon as I asked, she just started bawling. And she said, I took it. I knew I shouldn't take it. And so, I love that she admitted it, and this was a hard thing as a parent, right? Because I thought, okay, she's admitted it. But I said, well, we need to go back. We need to go back to the store and have you give that back. And of course, it was killing me as a dad because she was such a sweetheart. And of course, she's bawling her head off all the way back to the store. But she sucked it up and she went in there and she said, I'm sorry, I took this by mistake. And of course, the cashier lady knew exactly what I was doing as a father. And she said, well, thank you so much for telling me that. And that's not right, but I'm glad you said something. And I think we all, no matter if we're 4 years old or 64, we know when something just doesn't feel right. And I think integrity basically is, correcting that before you go ahead and do it. But if there is something that you didn't handle well, to just go say something about that, because we are human.
That's great, John. And actually, that reminds me, whenever I was little, I did the same thing with some gift cards. Like, I got gift cards from the store and put them in my pocket and went all the way home with them. My mom made me go back and give them.
Did you know there was no value to those gift cards when you took them?
I thought they were worth lots.
Okay.
That's a great story, John. So, I'm going to come at it from like a different angle here of like employee to employee. So I remember I worked at this fast food restaurant and I'd be working with my team. We had a manager over us, and the girls I was working with, we'd all be getting along really well. But then once the manager on duty left and a new manager came, I remember one time the group of girls that I was with, they just started talking super bad about the manager that just left. But I was thinking to myself, like, okay, we were all getting along. Like, I really like this other manager. And it just kind of put this taint on my relationship with those girls, because I thought, and it's kind of high school stuff, but, if you're talking behind others' backs, people are going to be questioning your integrity. So that's just an employee to employee example, but it definitely made me question, do I want to be working with these people?
Well, and just one thing adding into that is, not only could that be seen as kind of an integrity issue, these people are not being truthful, but it also drains people's water bottles all day. If you're always the kind of person that's talking bad about people and bad about the company now, if you have a legitimate concern with the manager or with something going on in the company, to go talk to the right people about that. So it's not only looking like, yes, I don't know if I trust you, because if you're doing that to that person, you're probably doing it to me. But man, what a downer to deal with that all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think about it more like from the HR standpoint of things, and just like sharing confidential information. And I learned that lesson really kind of the hard way. Not that I intentionally shared it, but I left a payroll report or a head count report on a copy machine somewhere. And I remember how detrimental that was, and the lesson that I learned. It was. It could have been bad. Somebody found it, but no one did. Thankfully, someone on my team is the one that found it. But nevertheless, I learned a valuable lesson from that. But I say all that to say, if you have good strategies and you have good reasons and you have good communication internally about things like your compensation strategy, for example, and someone else outside of my team had found that, we could have defended all of those numbers that were on that report. Now, it still would have been a good thing that they saw them all, but we could help them understand through our compensation strategy. So tying it back again to something business related is critical and helps you to understand why you're doing what you're doing internally. But still yet sharing that confidential information. I think about investigations that I was in the middle of at times. And, people that I was interviewing would ask me questions related to another interview I had done. And I was like, I'm not at liberty to talk about that right now. I'm trying to get through this particular investigation so I can make some type of discernment or recommendation around that. But people would probe and try to get additional information from me. And again, it was something I had to learn over time, but maybe there's a time where something needs to be shared, or if integrity is questionable, or if somebody's life is on the line, or there's a safety matter, in play, you might want to speak up and say something about those things, but again, it's just a lesson kind of thing that you have to learn, and why it's also important to trust your leader so that you can talk about those things. Have someone to talk about them.
Yeah, and I think the theme and all the things we've talked about in this podcast is it's not generally the big tax evasion, illegal things that make the news that come into daily life and integrity. It's small things, and so you want to inspire confidence with people around you. You have to be aware of all that. Everything you say, do doesn't mean that you're walking on eggshells all day, but what would people think? And tied to that is also being a person that will anticipate other people's questions. That could be your boss. It could be the owner of the company. It could be your peer. What are people going to ask? And I want Jason to tell a story he just talked about, like with kids and taking the garbage out, which is a great example. But there were employees I had that, let's say there was a machine down in the factory, and I would say, what's the plan? What do you think we should do now? And they would sometimes just say, defer to me. Well, you're the plant manager. You should do that. Or they would go, well, I don't know. I really haven't thought about that. Instead of going, well, we know John's going to ask if this is broken, what's the next steps? And they don't have to have a perfect plan. Well, I was thinking that until, while that's getting fixed, we could do X. I'll give you an example. This just happened last week. I was on an airplane, and we hadn't taken off yet. But the flight attendants go through and they check to see where people's bags are. And there was a woman sitting in front of me, and she had a pretty big backpack, like right by her legs. And of course, the flight attendant, and this person I could tell had flown many times because she had a frequent flyer tag on her backpack. And of course, the flight attendant said, "Now that can't stay there.
Of course.
It's too big, so you need to put it up in the overhead bins, or I need to check it." And so the woman says, "Well, I'm not having you check it because I checked a bag a year ago and it got lost." And again, everyone's sitting around going, "We're trying to take off. Mm-hmm. This isn't the time to talk about your story that happened a year ago." You knew, anticipating your leader's questions, and so the flight attendant was going to say something about that. So she just kept saying, "Well, I don't want it up in the bin." And the flight attendant, I told her afterward when I got off the plane, I said, "You were so patient," because she said, "We really only have two options now. You take things out of it so it will fit in the bin, or we have to check it." And I thought, no, there's a third option coming up in a minute. Right. They're going to pull you off this plane. Yeah. And again, just now there's multiple layers of things going on in that story, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. She could have been upset about other things, I don't know. But my point is that's anticipating, in this case, your leader, which is the flight attendant. They're going to ask about that. And it almost could tie back to the integrity thing a little bit. Maybe they won't say anything, right, and I'll keep my backpack here. Mm-hmm. And again, I know what people are thinking in cases like that. What does it matter in the whole scheme of this flight that I have my backpack, next to my feet? This isn't the time to complain about the rule, right? So you go, okay, I know what they're going to ask. I'm going to comply with that. Right. So that's both, to me, an integrity, anticipating leaders question story. But tell the story you just did before we got on here about taking the garbage out and anticipating a leader's question.
I have several kids, and so this has happened throughout the years, but where they would do the job of taking out the trash like they're supposed to. Thank you for that. But there would be a trail of juice, maybe that leaked out of the bag from the trash can all the way to the front door, and then it would still be there. And I said, what's this on the, it leaked. Well, my question would be, why didn't you clean it up? And so that could even go to people at work in a restaurant or anywhere else. That stuff happens all the time. Do the minimum required and not, I better clean this up because I know my leader, which is me in that instance, my dad is going to ask, or, I know my boss is going to ask, why is this mess here? Not thinking, well, I better go ahead and do this. That way there is no mess when he gets here and sees it. So.
Well, in both of those examples you and John both gave, though, there were other stakeholders involved, right? And yes, anticipating and thinking about how our decisions will impact others, yes, whether it's someone slipping on the kitchen floor, right. Going to get a glass of water, right, or someone on the shop floor is making a decision that's going to impact the purchasing department or the accounting, yes, department or, whatever. anticipating how it impacts others, I think, is also critical.
Love it.
Yeah, and like I said, that's what you could tell the vibe on the airplane was, could you please get that bag where it needs to be, because we're delaying this flight. Right. And there's 100 of us on this plane. Right. And so that is all, I think, wraps into a lot of things we talk about in our sessions. So obviously in these podcasts, we can't cover all this stuff in detail, but even if you've been through our sessions, hopefully these podcasts, these discussions are reminders. Mm-hmm. It's little things mostly that makes a big difference in the workplace for you, for others around you. So thanks for listening today. Thank you for joining us today on the John Harrison Podcast. As you know, we believe that a positive work culture creates a ripple effect that extends into families and communities. If you found anything of value in today's episode, please share it with somebody so they can hear it as well. And if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please fill out the form below.